Today's message is taken from our special music. It's all about fire and stepping into the fires of life. The metaphorical idea of putting ourselves in the midst of life's fires is to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. It involves moving out of our comfort zones, taking chances, reaching out, stepping out, and taking risks. It involves exposing ourselves to the possibilities of hurt, of ridicule, of mockery, and worse yet, maybe rejection. Those are all things that we get burned by the fire. We call them fools, the song says. We call them fools, those who dance within the flames, who risk the sorrow and the shame that always comes from getting burned. Well, call me a fool, but I'm one who's convinced that we're not truly living, that we're not experiencing all that life has to offer if we're standing outside of that fire. If we want to experience the fullness of life, the wholeness of God, we must throw ourselves into that fire of life. It is in opening our hearts, letting down our defenses, eliminating those walls that we build to protect our fragile selves, that we can fully experience the life that God has for us. Now, it's my experience that it's in the middle of those flames that we come to know the completeness of an overwhelming love, the all-encompassing tranquility of a peace that surpasses all understanding, and the fullness of a joy that comes forth and cannot be contained. Yeah, we definitely get burned once in a while. There are certainly times of disappointment, times of pain, but the rewards are definitely worth the risk. As T.S. Eliot so eloquently states, only those who risk going too far can possibly know how far they can really go. Once we've been there, once we've experienced life with a capital L, we'll never be satisfied standing outside of the fire again. So I'd like to talk today about 4 things, 4 ways we can dance within those flames. 4 ways to truly experience all that God has for our lives. And since our whole theme here and whole discussion is centered on fire, I'd like to use that word fire as an acronym for those 4 attitudes that we're going to talk about today. So number 1, first, is F. F. F is for follow your heart. Follow your heart. Follow your heart is very contrary to our rational thought, intellectualize everything society. Following our heart very often is seen by us or seen by others as irrational or even irresponsible. Following our heart puts us directly into the flames of life. We must step out of the norm, believe, put our faith into something other than our ego-directed lives. Following our heart, to me, is following the guidance of a higher power, a higher authority, a higher intelligence that's within us. Following our heart, or listening to our heart, is listening to the very voice of God. And the voice of God is that call that we hear as intuition. It's that something within us that tells us what to do or some way to act. It is that sudden inspiration about an idea that we've been pondering. Following our heart also leads credence to our dreams, those great and wonderful ideas that we have about our lives. And it's when we pursue our dreams and put our time and prayers and energy into making them a reality that miracles really start to happen. Louisa May Alcott, the famous writer, once said, Far away, there in the sunshine, are my highest aspirations. I may not reach them, but I can look up and see their beauty, believe in them, and try to follow where they lead. So I ask you today, what is it that energizes you? What is it that really gets you going? What is it that makes you come alive? Whatever that is your gift to the world. Because the world needs people who are energized. The world needs people who have come alive. And even though it tends to be contrary to our societal norms, the world needs people who are willing to step out, to be vulnerable, to be available, and to follow their heart. Now, in order to follow the guidance of our heart, one important thing, we must learn to listen. We must learn to listen, to differentiate between our heart speaking and our ego speaking. Now, unfortunately, most of us have an undeveloped practice of listening. Listening is an undeveloped practice. You see, we're taught from the time that we're very little to talk, but we're not taught to listen. We were probably told to listen. Many times we were probably told to listen, but it was those times we didn't want to hear what was being said. So we learned quickly how to tune things out, how to shut that down. But we're taught how to talk. We're taught how to defend ourselves. We're taught how to prepare a response. What were you thinking when you did that? Why did this happen? Immediately we're taught, I better know what I'm going to do. I better know how to respond here. We're taught to respond. We're not taught to listen. And then we're told, I don't want to hear any excuses. That just seems to reinforce those negative ideas of listening that we already have, those subconscious negative ideas. You don't want to hear what I have to say anyway. So you're trying to teach me to listen, but you won't listen to me. For most of us, listening is a practice that we haven't developed at all. And beyond that, it's a practice we've learned to avoid. Listening is an art. And this then brings us to the next point of today's message, things we can do that put us in those metaphorical fires of life. F is for follow your heart. But in order to follow our heart, we need to learn to listen and to differentiate between the heart and the ego. I then, F-I is for immerse yourself in God. Immerse yourself in God. To immerse ourselves means to totally surround ourselves. Means to cover ourselves completely. Means to give ourselves over to something completely. Now, we understand in religious science that we are always surrounded by, immersed in, filled with, and live in the very existence of God. But what I'm talking about here is giving our complete attention to that fact. Putting our entire focus into knowing, and knowing that we know, that universal intelligence that surrounds us. I'm talking about a personal relationship. Talking about learning to listen, learning to hear, learning to recognize and respond to that inner guide, that inner friend we know as Spirit or God. Immerse yourself in God. You know, I can come to get to know any of you pretty well without ever even talking to you. It's not real difficult to figure out or to find out that maybe you're married and have 2 kids. You drive a Toyota, you work as a school teacher, bank down at Alpine Bank, you love Mexican food, and on and on and on. I can get to know all about you without ever knowing who you are, without ever knowing the essence of what makes you you. Well, the same is true with God. We can study, we can read, we can come to church, we can take classes, we can go to seminars, workshops, we can sit and talk, we can discuss, We can spend a lifetime getting to know all about God. But unless we come to know and have a personal contact, direct time spent directly with God, we never know that personal presence within us. Joel Goldsmith, in his book Beyond Words and Thoughts, says, "The words you speak and the thoughts you think will remain purely a mental exercise and will not show forth in your daily life until you have experienced the Father within." Until you have experienced the Father within. So how then do we come to do this? How do we come to this experience? Well, I only know of one way, and that way may take multitude of forms, but I only know of one way, and that's that it requires us to make a personal connection. A connection within the depth of our very soul. A connection that is so real and so alive, it's as though we've just plugged into life for the very first time. And it's when we've made this connection that we begin to learn the art of listening. You see, when we've made this interconnection, we soon discover a whole new wonderful world called silence and stillness. Silence and stillness. And it's in this place of silence and stillness that we learn to discern the voice of God. We begin to learn to differentiate between the voice of ego and the voice of the Most High. And it's when we learn to listen that we can truly begin to follow our heart. Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, says, "The highest mental practice is to listen to this inner voice and declare its presence." The highest mental practice is to listen to this inner voice and declare its presence. The greater a man's consciousness of this indwelling I am, the more fully he will live. F, follow your heart. I, immerse yourself in God. And thirdly, our next step in those flames is R, is radiate from within. Radiate from within. One of the greatest discoveries we'll ever make, one of the most fantastic things that we'll ever find in life, that life with a capital L, is within us. Life is within us. What happens out here, as Daniel Herring says, is only scenery. It's only stage settings among which we move. But life, that's within us. That being the case, then all that we wish to experience in life, all the joy, happiness, peace, abundance, prosperity, fun, excitement, adventure, whatever it is we wish to experience, exists within us fully, completely, now. Our job then, as Browning says, is to open a way in which to release this imprisoned splendor. It's all within us. We must let it come forth. Let it radiate from our very being. Now, it may sound trite, but the only way to experience happiness is to be happy. The only way to experience joy is to be joyful. The only way to experience peace is to be peace. What a great thing, though. We need not depend on any condition outside of ourselves in order to experience happiness and joy and peace. And not only that, we need not let any condition outside of ourselves dictate to us our joy, our happiness, our peace. Because it's always with us, within us, always just waiting our recognition. Always just waiting to shine forth and radiate through us. Smile. It's okay. Laugh. Be at peace. Be in love. Be happy. And when the world ridicules you for it, and society mocks you for it, and people reject you because you are promoting these wild, crazy ideas of love and peace, just remember that dancing in the flames isn't always easy, but it's the only way to live. So what is it that stops us from enjoying these experiences on a regular basis? It's the same thing that hampers and destroys in all areas of our lives. It's one simple word, and that's fear. Fear. Fear in the form of anxiety, fear in the form of pride, fear in the form of jealousy, fear in the form of superiority, inferiority, fear in the form of doubt, of insecurity, fear of failure, fear of success, fear of rejection, fear of ridicule. Fear takes on a multitude of forms and a multitude of disguises. But fear's way always leads to less than, to not enough, and to unsatisfactory results. Fear is the ego's way of making its voice heard. How then do we overcome fear? Well, that's the question of the ages. But really, we go back to step 2. Immerse yourself in God. Immerse yourself in God. The Bible says that perfect love casts out fear, and that God is perfect love. Those seem to go hand in hand, don't they? Okay. F, follow your heart. I, immerse yourself in God. R, radiate from within. And finally, E is for expect the best. Expect the best. Live with great expectations and great things will happen. This quote from Art Fettig really sums up our final thought for the day. Live with great expectations and great things will happen. Ernest Holmes again says in The Science of Mind, through spiritual discernment, we see that we have within us a power which is greater than anything we shall ever contact. A power that can overcome every obstacle in our experience and set us safe, satisfied, and at peace, healed and prosperous in a new light and a new life. This being the case, why would we ever expect anything less than the best? If God is the center and director of our lives, we can be assured that the best is always ours, continually, ever flowing in and through our life. Expecting the best aligns our consciousness with the all good of God. It opens our minds and our hearts to receive in fullness. Now, Jesus told us that it's God's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. I don't know about you, but I list God's kingdom as one of the best experiences I might have. I'm looking for the best. Expecting the best can, of course, make us vulnerable. I know several people who make it a point to expect the worst in any situation. You probably know people like this. They absolutely cannot handle the potential disappointment and feelings of failure that might arise if what they see as the best doesn't come about. That's a defense mechanism, of course, and a logical one, says the ego, that allows them to protect that fragile side that we all have. When we expect the worst, we may not be disappointed. Or we may be pleasantly surprised when the worst doesn't happen, when the worst doesn't show up. But we will never have the thrill, the joy, the peace of knowing the very highest and best in all areas of our lives. Expect the best. Rely on God. Expect the best from God. God will deliver. Life is not tried. It is merely survived if you're standing outside the fire. The very words to the song. So step on in. Try life on. Shock the world. Be happy. Be peaceful. Be content. Listen to that guiding voice, that inner presence within you. Follow your heart. Immerse yourself in God. Radiate love. Expect the best. And finally, from Mark Twain, as Kurt had, a final thought. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the things you did. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover.